Okay, what's up, folks? Rich Fantastic with you. It's Sunday, February 5th, 2017, of course, Super Bowl Sunday. But right now, we are doing our weekly NBA report, starting as we always do in the Eastern Conference. The Cleveland Cavaliers still setting the pace. They have a 2.5 game lead over the Boston Celtics. They're 34 and 15. They got a win last night over the New York Knicks. The final score was only 7 points. It really wasn't that close for most of the game. But we'll get into the Knicks in a little bit. Cavaliers played without Kyrie Irving. LeBron James was playing very well. I was watching bits and pieces of that game. But certainly, this is a team, the question marks have been, well, they need another playmaker. Got to have another playmaker. Well, let's see if a win like that would get them going, where they had to play without Kyrie Irving and LeBron James had to do a little more, of course. You had all the talk with Charles Barkley and all that. So we'd certainly have to see if this is something where LeBron James will springboard himself. The Celtics, winners of six straight, they had that big comeback over the Toronto Raptors last Wednesday. They of course play later on today, nationally televised game. We'll do Celtics report either tomorrow or tomorrow after this game or today before the game. But they're starting to play very well. Their defense is coming along a little bit better. The rebounding still needs to improve and just be more consistent. I see at times where they're much better with their rebounding. Helping each other out, having guys come in when, a big is holding off another big, but it's just not consistent at times enough. But certainly, at least scheme-wise, I see the rebounding getting better. Still only plus 2.7 in their differential as compared to the Cavaliers, who are plus 5.1. Washington, winners of 7 straight, 9-1 in their last 10. I believe they got a victory last night. Yeah, they did. They beat the New Orleans Pelicans. John Wall, of course, continues to impress. He is at 23 points and 10.4 assists. Got to really start considering him for the MVP the way he's going. There was a lot of talk I saw last night on the pregame for the Saturday game. It was Mike Wilbon, who's in the Washington area. He says, of course, the fans are not really giving them the love that they need. I don't know. I've always seen Washington as a pretty strong fan base, at least for their football team, but that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Last night, John Wall went for 24 and 13, did have 5 steals. His defense, I think, is one of the more underrated things. Washington is a team that really, had a down year last year. I was expecting a lot more from them last year, considering where they were, how they were building, how they continued to progress, from year to year, especially the playoffs. Winning those road games as they did, advancing to the second round. And then, last year they didn't even make the playoffs. They just completely fell off. So let's see, is this going to be the year this year that's more indicative of what last year was supposed to be? Something to keep an eye on. Bradley Beal was not that great last night. He's a guy that they need. He only dropped 12 points, so I'll keep an eye on that. There's always been the dynamic with John Wall and Bradley Beal. How can those two get along? Would they trade Bradley Beal? I don't know. I don't think so, but he's a guy who's got to play better than what he's been doing. Atlanta 30 and 21, Toronto 30 and 21. Toronto is 2 and 8 in their last 10, however. So they were 18 or 28 and 13. They've really been sputtering a bit. Of course, they've had the DeMar DeRozan injury, so that's part of it, but they were struggling even with him in the lineup. Indiana, another team streaking at 28 and 22. They've won 6 straight. Chicago 25 and 26. Detroit has now gotten back into the playoff picture. 23 and 28. They've won, or they've only lost one. They're negative 9/10 of a point in their differential. Atlanta is at 0 in their differential, but listed as a negative, so they're probably scored less than they've scored more, and just it averages out to 0. Charlotte continues to struggle. They've lost 7 straight. Milwaukee got a nice win last night. They're 22 and 28. New York 22 and 30 off of that loss. The Knicks are interesting. They lost last night. There's all the talk about Carmelo Anthony being traded. This team is on pace to win about 35 games. I know it's not what Knicks fans want to hear, but that's still an improvement. You go from 17 to 32 to 35. it's one of those things. Where do you go? You're saying, well, we're not progressing enough, but we're progressing a little. Do you really then want to start back over by trading Carmelo Anthony? When Phil Jackson took over and you had the awful year, how do you want to improve? Do you want to improve marginally? Do you want to improve at all? Do you want to just burn it down? I don't know what to make with the Knicks. They're probably going to trade Carmelo Anthony, but it's one of the things I don't think they should do, but who knows at this point. Miami, of course, has won 10 straight. Even so, though, they're only two behind the Pistons because the bottom of the playoff picture isn't that good, for lack of a better term. But a team from 11-30 to 21-30, still not even in the playoffs. Having to win 10 just to get 9 games under 500. That's interesting. Orlando 20-33. They've been a bit disappointing. I expected, this to be a 35 to 38 win team. They're probably going to win about 33, 34, so a little behind the pace. Philadelphia now 4-6 in the last 10. They've lost 3 straight, starting to come back to earth a little bit. But they are 18-32. If this team could avoid 50 losses, that would be very impressive considering how awful they've been. And of course, the Brooklyn Nets are now 9-41. They're 1-9 in the last 10, losers of 8 straight, -9 in their differential. They're really starting to crash. 65 losses would be likely for this team. In the Western Conference, Golden State 43-8. They lost in overtime to the Kings last night, but they are 8-2 in their last 10. Of course, their differential is plus 12.8. It just shows, one loss, they were over 13, now they dropped. That's how good they're playing, that they lose in overtime by, 3 points, and their differential drops the way it does. San Antonio 39-11. The Houston Rockets, James Harden, they gave away a game against the Atlanta Hawks. That was very interesting. Harden at 28.9, 11.4. He wasn't able to put that game away where they had a big lead. Of course, we did the video with, I talked about Isaiah Thomas MVP case. That's certainly something to look at, that Houston would give away a game like that. Not to say that the Celtics haven't given away their games at times, but it's never really been in a situation when they're up 20, with 5 minutes left in a game. It was more like 20 with about 7 minutes left in the game. But that's certainly something that was on national television that you have to look at when it comes to James Harden. As for the rest, Utah Jazz 32-19, 7-3 in the last 10. The Clippers 31-19, again up and down with the Clippers. They are of course 5-5 in their last 10. Memphis 31-22. Memphis, we say this all the time, they're a good quality NBA team. They're just not going to win a championship. They could give teams fits when it comes to the playoffs this year. They'll probably be around 6, maybe get up to 5th. They play potentially a team like a Houston in the first round. That would be interesting. As good as Houston's playing, Houston may face a team like Memphis. I'm very curious to see what happens. If Memphis gets up to 5th, they would certainly have an advantage, at least I would think, against what would look like an upstart Utah Jazz team. So it's really interesting with that Grizzlies team. They're a team that could, certainly make things happen in the playoffs. In a first round, give a team struggles in a second round. But they can't win a championship, but what they could do could have ripple effects moving forward in the playoffs. But give Fizdale a lot of credit for the way he's coaching. Of course, Oklahoma City, Russell Westbrook put up another triple-double. They're 29-22. And then the bottom of the playoffs, just like the East, teams that are, plus or more than 5 games below 500. Everyone else is in the plus. The top 7 is in the plus in the differential in the West. Everyone after the 7th is in the minus. Portland continues to disappoint, 4-6 in their last 10. The Dallas Mavericks, only 2 out. They've won 4 straight. They're starting to come along, even without Dirk Nowitzki, whose numbers are very pedestrian this season. It just shows how good of a coach Rick Carlisle is. Sacramento 20-31. They got the big win last night, but they're 4-6 in their last 10. Once one of these teams gets going, you look at Dallas, they've got off to such a slow start, though, that they're now starting to get going and they're just in it. I don't know how long they're going to continue this pace. They may come back just a little bit and then start to run again. But as far as teams like Portland, Denver, once one of those teams get going, then you'll have to see what will happen as far as the 8th spot in the playoffs. New Orleans, 19-32. I don't think they can make it. You'll have to see. Minnesota, still disappointing this year. They lost last night as well. Who did they lose to? I believe they lost to the Atlanta Hawks. Minnesota 19, or then the Los Angeles Lakers 17-36. Can they avoid 55 losses? That would be a benefit to them, or at least an improvement. And then the Phoenix Suns 16-35. Okay, of course the power rankings. Golden State is number 1, San Antonio number 2. That's pretty easy there. I'm going to give number 3 to the Cavaliers with the victory last night. They played very well without Kyrie Irving. Number 4, the Houston Rockets. And number 5, the Boston Celtics, even though the Wizards are right there. Okay, so like we said, I don't know if I'll do the Celtics report today after this video gets uploaded, or tomorrow after the game they play today. National television, we'll have to see. Be sure to stay tuned for the recap of the Super Bowl when that goes final as well. Of course, any other flash news alerts, we'll give them to you. And remember, we appreciate all subscriptions. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.